It didn't start with what they said. It started with something much older. The glass didn't shatter because of this moment. It shattered because it was already cracked. For years. And today, when they looked at you that way, when they dismissed your voice, questioned your worth, or crossed that invisible line, something ancient woke up inside you. Something that's been waiting. Your voice got louder. Your body tightened. You spoke truths laced with venom. And after the chaos, silence. But this silence isn't peace. It's the kind that arrives after a storm that no one really won. And here's the truth no one tells you. You didn't react because you were right. You reacted because you were still hurt. Somewhere beneath all your reasoning, beneath the logic and moral high ground, there's a bruise that hasn't healed. A bruise that thinks it needs to defend itself, even when no one is attacking. That reaction you had, it wasn't about strength. It wasn't even about justice. It was about survival. The survival of a part of you that's still trying to be seen, still trying to be safe. But here's the catch. Every time you react from that place, from that scar, you relive it. You give it oxygen. You build your identity around your pain instead of your power. And the saddest part? The moment passes, but the damage stays. Not just to others, to you. To the part of you that actually wants to grow. Your rage isn't about the moment. It's about the memory that never got justice. And until you face it, not fight it, not justify it, but face it, you'll keep reacting to ghosts, calling it passion, calling it strength, calling it truth. But it's not. It's pain in disguise. There's a moment just before the reaction. You know it well, even if you've never named it. It's the heartbeat that accelerates, the jaw that tightens, the sudden weight in your chest like a hand pressing down from inside. You think you're angry, but you're not. You're remembering. You're remembering without even realizing it. You mistaken a memory for a threat. And now your body's trying to finish a fight that started decades ago. You think you're responding to them, but you're still trying to answer the moment you weren't answered. That's what a reaction is. It's not power. It's residue. The leftover heat of something you weren't ready to feel when it first happened. A moment that branded you silently, permanently. And now, every time you feel that same temperature, you ignite. This isn't emotion. It's echo. Somewhere back there, you learned that raising your voice made you matter. That silence meant weakness. That people only listen when you burn. And now you carry a torch into every conversation. Because you don't trust that you'll be heard without the fire. But what if I told you? The fire was never your power. It was just a flare from a wound trying to get attention. Every overreaction is a bruise trying to speak. And the worst part is, you don't know where it began. You've wrapped your identity around the defense, but forgotten the first hit. Close your eyes for a moment. Breathe. Now ask yourself this. What memory is your anger still trying to protect? It might be a sentence someone said that made you feel invisible. It might be a betrayal no one saw. Or a look from your father that froze your confidence for years. But it's there. Somewhere deep beneath the surface, behind the rationalizations, behind the stories you rehearsed, is the actual origin. The first trigger, the original cut, not the scar. The moment the blade touched skin, and that moment, if you don't name it, will keep naming you over and over and over again. Because here's the truth that will follow you until you finally turn around. What you don't heal, you repeat. What you don't confront, you become. And what you defend without understanding controls you. The person you yelled at today, they weren't the enemy. They were the mirror. And yes, maybe they were wrong. Maybe they should have treated you differently. But ask yourself this. Why did it pierce so deeply? Why that much heat over that smallest spark? The answer is simple. You weren't reacting to them. You were reacting to the echo. An echo from a version of you that still doesn't feel safe. Still doesn't feel heard. Still doesn't feel real. And so it speaks in volume, in urgency, in rage, because it believes, on a level below logic, that unless it erupts, it will be erased. Read that again. Not protect, preserve. Your reactions aren't trying to guard you from harm. They're trying to preserve your identity, the version of you that survived what you couldn't explain. But that version isn't who you are. It's who you were. And now, every time you choose that old reaction, you're casting a vote for the old version, the defensive version, the scared version, the one who had to raise their voice because no one ever listened to their silence. It's time to remember, you don't need to react to prove you exist. You don't need to attack to avoid abandonment. You don't need to perform rage to validate your truth. Your truth is valid, even when you speak it calmly, even when no one claps, even when you say nothing at all. So here's the real work, not to suppress your reaction, not to shame it, but to trace it, all the way back, to sit with that first moment, to face it, to grieve it, to say, once and for all, that did hurt me, and it's okay. That's how the echo fades. Not with force, but with forgiveness, not for them, for you, for the version of you that had to hold it in for so long that now can finally let go. There's a strange relief that comes with being right, like standing taller after a battle, like planting your flag in the middle of a conversation and daring anyone to move it. But ask yourself, what are you really defending? Most people don't argue to reveal truth. They argue to protect identity. You weren't trying to understand. You were trying to win. Not the discussion, the feeling, that brief electric high of superiority, that they were wrong and you were righteous. Here's the problem. Righteousness is often just a mask. And underneath it is fear. Because if you're wrong even once, your whole armor cracks. And for someone who built their identity around control, around certainty, around never again being caught off guard, wrongness feels like death. So you dig in. Even when the facts don't line up. Even when the voice in your chest whispers, you're just scared again. You keep arguing, not for clarity, but for emotional survival. This is the illusion of control. That if you can just out-talk them, outsmart them, you'll never be hurt again. But control doesn't equal peace. And being right doesn't equal being healed. You've confused volume with value, certainty with safety, moral correctness with self-worth. And it's killing your growth. Because here's the truth. You don't have to be right to be powerful. You don't have to win to be worthy. You don't need the last word to have the first self-respect. Truth doesn't scream. Trauma does. And the louder you get, the more you insist, the more obvious it becomes, you're not talking to them. You're talking to a version of you that still doesn't feel seen. Let's break something wide open. When you make being right your emotional currency, you bankrupt your relationships. You bankrupt your empathy. You bankrupt your peace. Because now, disagreement is danger. Every difference becomes disrespect. Every contrast feels like a threat. You don't see the person anymore. You see the enemy of your stability. And that's not maturity. That's ego wearing wisdom like a costume. What if your most aggressive moments, your most indignant, reactive, brilliant takedowns, were actually fear responses, clever verbal fight or flight? What if your intelligence was just protecting your insecurity? Because being right is safer than being vulnerable. It's safer than saying, that hurt me. It's safer than admitting, I don't know how to handle this. So you armor up. You point to logic. You recite facts. And behind it all, you're still just trying not to bleed. Would you rather be right or be free? Free from the addiction to control. Free from the need to prove. Free from the endless emotional courtroom in your mind, where you're both the lawyer and the defendant, the judge and the prisoner. Imagine this. You're in the middle of a heated exchange. Someone says something that cuts deep. But instead of tightening, you breathe. You see your reaction rising, and you recognize it. You don't grab the sword this time. You step back. You observe the fire without becoming it. And from that place, you speak, not to dominate, not to defend, but to reveal. That's not weakness. That's sovereignty. And maybe, just maybe, you realize something wild. There is no winner in a battle of the wounded. There's only another scar. So what if you laid it down? Not your intelligence, not your standards, just the need to be right. Because truth doesn't need volume. It doesn't need applause. It just is. And the more you trust your truth, the less you need to convince anyone. Truth doesn't flinch. Ego does. Let that echo. Because the moment you no longer need to be right, you make room to become whole. And wholeness? That's what you were chasing all along. Not the argument. Not the proof. Just the deep, unshakable knowing that you are not your reaction, not your opinion, not your defense. You are something much older, much wiser, much freer. And no one can take that from you, not even when you're wrong. They say you're overreacting, that it wasn't that serious, that you're too sensitive, too intense, too much. And maybe they're right, but not for the reason they think, because the moment they triggered you was the moment you met yourself, not the polished self, not the version you post or protect, the buried self, the shadow. And no, you didn't overreact. You over-remember. What you thought was about them was actually a return to a version of you that still flinches in the dark, still waits for the apology that never came, still bristles at being misunderstood, unheard, unseen. That's who showed up in that argument. Not the wise, calm, evolved version, the younger one, the hidden one, the part of you that you swore you'd outgrow, but secretly, silently, you've just outfitted with better vocabulary. Here's what no one tells you. Every person who triggers you is a mirror. Every conflict is a doorway, not into their dysfunction, into yours. You meet the real you, the exiled one, through discomfort, through being judged, through not being in control. Because those moments expose what you still haven't accepted. Think of someone who always gets under your skin. Now be honest. What do they reflect back to you? Is it your fear of being dismissed? Your need to be validated? Your craving for respect? What do you see in them that you refuse to see in you? Because that's where the reaction lives, in the disowned parts of yourself. There's a version of you that was never allowed to speak softly. A version that was ridiculed for crying, for not knowing, for needing. So now you rage. Now you dominate. Now you defend with precision and fire. But not because it's truth, because it's armor. Here's the twist. The people who trigger you most are the ones still talking to your shadow. And that shadow, it's not here to haunt you. It's here to free you, but only if you're willing to look. What part of yourself do you still refuse to look at? Sit with that. Don't rush to fix it. Just hold it. The part that feels like a burden. The part you silence in order to appear strong. The part that needed comfort, but learned to punish instead. That's the real conversation. Not who was right. Not who started it, but who you become when you're triggered. That's the curriculum. That's the classroom. That's the mirror. And here's where the power comes in. Not when you avoid conflict. Not when you win arguments. But when you use the trigger to see what's still unintegrated. Because that's what the inner work actually is. Integration. Not perfection. Not performance. But meeting every broken piece of yourself and letting it come home. The moment you see your reaction as a signal, not a sentence, you gain power, not over them, over you. There's an archetype that lives in every human, the guardian of the shadow. It's the part of you that has spent a lifetime keeping the most tender fractured parts hidden, locked behind intellect, sealed behind sarcasm, drowned in busyness. And now, it's time to invite those parts back. The version that cried in the dark and got told to toughen up. The one who tried to be kind and got steamrolled. The dreamer, the innocent, the vulnerable. They're not weaknesses. They're power you haven't yet remembered how to hold. So next time you're triggered, try this. Instead of reacting, reflect. Instead of accusing, ask. Instead of raising your voice, lower your armor. Say to yourself, this moment isn't here to destroy me. It's here to reveal me. Because that's the truth. The world isn't attacking you. It's awakening you. And the trigger? It's not the problem. It's the invitation. To face what you abandoned. To forgive what you buried. To reclaim what you lost in order to survive. That shadow didn't show up to fight you. It showed up to free you. Read that again. Because the sooner you stop running from the reflection, the sooner you can meet the you who doesn't need to react to be real, who doesn't need to win to be worthy, who doesn't need to prove anything. That version is already here, waiting. Behind the next mirror, you learn early. Don't flinch. Don't cry. Don't show too much. And above all, never let them see that they got to you. So you built something. A wall, quiet at first, invisible to others, but heavy in your chest. You called it boundaries. You called it strength. But it wasn't either. It was fear reinforced. Because real strength isn't what you built to protect yourself. It's what you discover when you no longer need protection. And that's the trap, isn't it? The more pain you've buried, the more pride you wrap around it. You think your silence is power, but sometimes silence is just shame with its mouth sewn shut. You think your coldness is composure, but sometimes it's just your nervous system begging not to be cracked open again. You've mistaken defense for dignity, control for clarity. And the walls? You've decorated them with achievement, with wit, with status. But they're still walls. And they're keeping something out. But they're also keeping you in. Visualize this. A castle, massive, stone, fortified, unbreakable, and underneath it, landmines. Every step, every voice, every challenge becomes a potential explosion. Not because of what's happening, but because of what's hidden beneath. Your unhealed self is running the show, quietly, desperately, brilliantly disguised as confidence. But confidence doesn't fear softness. Confidence doesn't confuse detachment with discipline. Confidence doesn't react to everything that moves. It observes, it chooses, it responds, without needing to dominate. And that's your next edge, to become unshakable, not because you built taller walls, but because you become grounded, solid, rooted, not in anger, in awareness. Let's make something clear. Walls don't protect power. They delay transformation. Because every time you react by shutting down, cutting off, ghosting, exploding, proving, you're not standing in strength. You're hiding in strategy. And strategy is survival. Not sovereignty? What would your power sound like in silence? Not the silence of shutdown. The silence of certainty. The kind that doesn't flinch when misunderstood. The kind that doesn't need to reply just to fill space. The kind that waits and watches and knows. That kind of silence only arrives when you've outgrown the need to armor up. You see, real strength is presence, not posturing. It's the moment you stop rehearsing reactions in your mind. Stop scanning for threats. Stop needing to always have the last word. It's when you become still, not because you're afraid, but because you're finally free. Stillness doesn't mean surrender. It means sovereignty. Remember that. Repeat it every time the old fire rises. Because your triggers aren't asking you to burn brighter. They're asking you to sit still long enough to see the pattern. To sit in the discomfort of not reacting and watch what grows. And what grows is you. Not the guarded you. The integrated you. The one who doesn't swing every time someone throws a word. The one who doesn't need to be hard to be holy. Imagine this future. Someone disrespects you, crosses a line, pokes a place that used to explode, and you don't shrink. You don't snap. You stay, fully in your body, fully in your breath, clear, calm, collected. Because you've trained your nervous system to belong to you again. Because you've reclaimed the authority to respond instead of react. That's the kind of strength that can't be shaken. Because it's not built on defense. It's built on knowing. So I'll ask you again, what would your power sound like? In silence? Could you hold it? Could you let it stretch across the moment without reaching for a sword, without reaching for validation, without reaching for noise? Could you let your stillness speak louder than your rage ever did? Because that is where your future begins. You've been told to let it go, to move on, to grow up, to stop making it such a big deal. So you did the only thing you could. You buried it. You armored it. You called it the past and kept marching forward. But pain doesn't dissolve just because you distract yourself. It waits. It adapts. And eventually, it wears you in your tone, in your pacing, in the way you raise your voice without realizing it, or the way you shut down before anyone gets too close. You think you've moved on, but what if you've only disguised the wound? You can only fake healing for so long. Because under the surface of every strong voice is a small voice that never got to finish its sentence. Under every reaction is a moment you weren't allowed to feel. And if you want your power back, you have to go get that version of you. Not to relive it, not to drown in it, but to witness it. Visualize this, you standing in a burned-out hallway of memory, scorched walls, charred silence, and at the end of that hallway, a door. Behind it, a version of you still waiting, still holding the pain, still holding the torch. And the torch isn't here to destroy. It's here to illuminate. You step forward. You open the door. And there they are, small, shaking, but still alive. This is the moment. You don't explain. You don't justify. You listen. You let them hand you what they've been holding all these years. The shame, the confusion, the guilt, the raw, hot anger. And when you take it, it doesn't burn you. Because now, you have the strength to hold it without becoming it. This is emotional alchemy, turning the weight of a reaction into the wisdom of a response. Are you finally ready to see the scar without becoming it? Because that's the invitation, to feel without flinching, to remember without reacting, to see the whole wound and not identify with it. You are not the pain. You are the one witnessing the pain. And in that space, that still, sacred space between stimulus and reaction, you rediscover your choice. You don't have to raise your voice to be heard. You don't have to be right to be worthy. You don't have to carry rage to stay safe. You can finally let the armor go. Because that armor, it's cold. And it was only ever meant for war, not for love, not for growth, not for your becoming. But you don't become powerful by pretending the past didn't happen. You become powerful by facing it, by walking into the fire that once scared you and realizing it cannot burn you anymore. Because you're not the same. You're not that scared, silent, reactive version anymore. Now you can respond from awareness, from depth, from truth, not trauma. The wound was real. But you are no longer the wound. Read that again. Let it settle. You were hurt, but that doesn't have to be your headline. You were wounded, but that doesn't have to be your identity. Because now, you are not fighting to survive. You're choosing to become. It's in your hands now. The fire, the memory, the part of you that never got to be seen. So look at them, truly. Breathe. Speak. Not from defense, but from devotion. You don't have to protect me anymore. I'm here now. And I choose clarity over chaos, presence over protection, love over armor. That's the moment you reclaim yourself, not the reactive version, the reverent one. And maybe, just maybe, next time someone pushes that old bruise, you won't erupt. You won't collapse. You'll pause, breathe, and realize, I already met this version, and I brought them home. Imagine it. The same moment that used to wreck you. A harsh word, a broken promise, a look that once triggered fire. But this time, something's different. You still feel it, but you don't become it. There's space now. A breath. A pause. No more scrambling to defend. No more mental courtroom. No more fists curled behind your voice. Just presence. Calm. Sovereignty. That's what power feels like. Not louder. Not colder. Not sharper. Just unmoved. You didn't numb out. You woke up. You saw the storm coming and remembered. You are not the storm. You are the sky it passes through. This is the return. To your center, to the version of you who no longer flinches, because they no longer fear their reflection. You don't avoid triggers now. You study them. You welcome them like messengers, not enemies. Because each one tells you something. Here is where you were once abandoned. Here is where you forgot your voice. Here's where you became smaller to stay safe. And now, instead of reacting, you respond. When you stop reacting, what else becomes possible? The silence used to feel threatening. Now it feels holy. You used to reach for weapons. Now you reach for wisdom. You used to break things to feel in control. Now you build boundaries without needing to shout. This is not the end of emotion. It's the beginning of freedom inside emotion. No more exploding to prove you're alive. No more over-explaining just to be understood. You let your presence speak. Your energy translate what words cannot. You've entered a new field now. One where control becomes curiosity. Where winning is no longer the goal. Where peace is not performance, it's practice. Where I don't need to react doesn't mean I don't care. It means I finally care enough to choose how I show up. This is emotional wealth. This is inner royalty. This is the power that can sit in the fire and not need to burn the house down. This is not the end of emotion. It's the beginning of power. Let that live in you, not as inspiration, as memory. Because this version of you, the one who pauses, sees, speaks from truth, they've always been there, buried beneath the fence, locked behind reaction. But now they lead, quietly, powerfully, without apology. You've carried the code all along. Now you have the key, use it.